I wanted to just describe exercise 2 a little bit and add some flavor to it to make it more clear what it is you're doing there, what the purpose is. So you see kind of a fictional language created just for the sake of exercise 2. And I want you to imagine that you're studying some alien written language, and the way these aliens speak is to write just by writing. They write sentences to each other, and all of their sentences look like little diagrams like this, where you've got a 3x3 grid and either a dot or no dot in each of the 9 squares. So this is a sentence in the alien language. So you'll see one alien write this, and then another one might respond and say this, and maybe the reply to that will be this. And this is just the way the language works. And you have no idea what these sentences mean. So each one of these is a sentence. Maybe you could imagine putting a period after it. You have no idea what any of these actually mean. However, you have studied enough debate or logical arguments or proofs that these aliens write with this language. You've studied that enough to understand the formal deductive rules that they use. So while you have no idea what this utterance here means, you do know what can be deduced from it. So if it were true, then you know that certain things follow, that they are true. And notice I'm talking about these weird diagrams being either true or false. That's because in this fictional language, these are sentences. They're the propositions of the language. So it makes sense to talk about whether they're true or false. Now, we are accepting we have determined by studying by studying some debates and logical arguments made by these aliens, we've determined that these two are axioms in the language. So these two sentences are just always accepted as true, as a starting point, kind of, for all arguments. So if you take these as premises, all aliens will agree about them. You don't know what they mean, you just know that they are considered to be true. So they're like, in our mathematical language, this will be our first axiom, x equals x. This will be something that everybody who does mathematics agrees about. And those people who don't agree about it, there's nothing wrong with those people, but maybe they're just using the equal symbol to mean something else than what we mean by it. But everybody who thinks of the equal symbol in the conventional way will agree that it requires that x equals x. So this is a sentence in the language of mathematics that serves as an axiom. Similarly, these two sentences here serve as axioms in the fictional alien language of exercise 2. And in addition to axioms, you also know about the rules of deduction. So you've got these two red axioms to start with, but you also know that from any one of these, you can deduce the 90-degree rotated version of it in some direction. Clockwise, so you could deduce this. So you don't know what these sentences mean, but you know that if you said this to one of the aliens, whatever it is you said, they would agree with you because that's apparently one of their axioms. And then if you said this afterwards, they would agree that that follows. So they would agree. Because one of the logical rules is that if you rotate one of these sentences, for some reason, they agree also with the rotated sentence. If you do exactly a 90-degree rotation like this. And there's another logical rule that you can see described in the exercise. So it's a fictional formal language that has two axioms and two logical rules that allow you to deduce theorems out of the axioms. So some propositions end up being true, meaning they are provable. For our purposes, that means they're provable, meaning there's a way to deduce them from the axioms. And some propositions are not provable. And it's just interesting that you can talk about all this stuff formally without talking about semantics, without talking about what these mean, what the aliens are actually trying to say, or how they're relating these sentences to anything in the real world. And this is also a good point to describe again the layout of the course as a whole. So there are two elements that we're noticing a formal language has. There's the starting points, the axioms, and then there's these yellow arrows which represent deductive rules, ways of the rules that tell you what you're allowed to deduce from what other things. The course is first going to focus on the rules of deduction, which is called mathematical logic, and that will be for a couple of weeks. And then the course will focus on these starting points for the language of mathematics. Not for this fictional language. The fictional language will be thrown away after you're finished with exercise 2. But basically, the deductive rules are what the first portion of the course are based on, and the axioms and the actual mathematical language is going to be the content of the rest of the course.